In the calm waters of a remote river, a millionaire businessman promises his 4-year-old twin daughters a special trip they'll never forget. The girls watch curiously as their father puts an old, leaky boat in the water. What they don't know is that this cold man plans to get rid of them forever. When he puts them in the boat and pushes it forcefully into the current, the children initially laugh. But when water starts entering through the holes and their father flees cowardly, the little ones now scream, "Daddy, Daddy," mixed with desperate cries. It's then that a white horse grazing near the river witnesses all the cruelty and feels immeasurable urgency. It sees the boat sinking deeper and then makes the riskiest decision of its life. Before we begin, if you love animals as much as we do, subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss any emotional stories. Thank you. Now back to our story. The morning silence on Stony Creek was broken only by the gentle murmur of the flowing water when the deep rumble of a powerful engine echoed through the trees. A luxury black truck emerged on the dirt road, towing a small trailer that swayed with the weight of an old, worn-out boat. Clara and Sophie, identical 4-year-old twins, sat in the back seat of the vehicle, their yellow dresses a stark contrast to the car's dark interior. They swung their little legs, which couldn't reach the floor, watching the wild landscape unfold around them. Their expressions were a mixture of curiosity and a slight apprehension they couldn't explain. "Daddy, are we there yet?" asked Clara, the more talkative of the two, while playing with a worn-out rag doll. Richard Montgomery, a 42-year-old man who was always in impeccable suits, kept his eyes fixed on the road. His fingers tapped nervously on the leather steering wheel, a contradiction to his apparent calm. "We're almost there, my princesses. You're going to love the ride Daddy has prepared." Sophie, the more observant one, furrowed her little brow. Something in her father's voice sounded different, more forced than usual. She took her sister's hand, an instinctive gesture the two always made when they felt insecure. The businessman had woken before dawn, preparing every detail of that day, with the same precision he applied to his business dealings. For 2 weeks, he had meticulously planned every move, every word, every gesture. His new wife, Vivian, a demanding socialite who refused to accept baggage from the past, had made it clear. Either he resolved the situation with his illegitimate daughters, or she would leave, taking with her not only her love, but also the social connections essential for his business. The surrounding landscape gradually changed. The city houses gave way to sparse rural properties, then to the dense woods that stretched to the riverbanks. The smell of damp earth and vegetation wafted through the partially open windows, bringing with it the wild scent of untouched nature. "Daddy brought a special little boat just for you," Richard continued, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're going to have a ride you'll never forget." The girls exchanged glances. There was something in their father's words that didn't sound like a happy promise, but like something darker that their childish minds couldn't decipher. Clara clutched the doll to her chest, while Sophie leaned in to whisper in her sister's ear, "I want Mommy." The comment made Richard grip the steering wheel tighter. Marina, the twins' mother, was miles away, caring for her own sick mother in another state. She had trusted him completely when he offered to look after the girls for a few weeks. If she had known his true intentions, she would have never left the girls in his care. Finally, the truck stopped in a clearing near the creek. The spot was isolated, surrounded by old trees that formed a natural curtain of privacy. Only a simple house was visible in the distance, on the other side of the water, where a solitary fisherman lived, whom Richard had met days earlier. "We're here," he announced, turning off the engine. The sudden silence was filled with the sounds of nature, the chirping of birds, the buzzing of insects, and the constant murmur of the current. The girls got out of the truck with their father's help, their little feet touching the soft earth of the bank. They looked around with wide eyes, impressed by the green immensity that surrounded them. It was a world completely different from anything they knew. Richard began to unload the boat from the trailer, his movements calculated but tense. The vessel was visibly deteriorated, with peeling paint and small holes disguised by makeshift patches that he knew wouldn't hold for long. "What an ugly boat, Daddy," observed Clara with the brutal honesty of children. "It's a special boat," he replied, avoiding his daughter's gazes. "It's going to take you on a great adventure." The words echoed in the morning air like a sinister prophecy, while the calm waters of the creek continued their eternal flow, oblivious to the human drama about to unfold on its banks. On the other side of the creek, Samuel "Sam" Jones was waking, up with the first rays of sun that streamed through his simple house's window. At 53, the fisherman maintained the routine he had followed for decades: wake up early, brew strong black coffee, and check his nets before the day's activities scared the fish away. His wooden house, built with his own hands 20 years ago, stood just 100 yards from the bank. It was modest but cozy, with a porch where he spent afternoons mending fishing gear and watching the movement of the water. Every plank, every nail had been placed with love and dedication, turning that place into a true home. What made Sam's life special was not just the tranquility of the creek, but the company of Thunder, a white horse with an immaculate coat that had arrived on his property 5 years ago. The animal had appeared injured and starving, likely having escaped from a distant farm. Sam took him in, tended to his wounds, and since then, the two had become inseparable companions. Thunder was no ordinary horse. He possessed an extraordinary intelligence that impressed even the most skeptical neighbors. He understood complex commands, responded to his own name, and showed an emotional sensitivity that bordered on the supernatural. When Sam was sad, the animal would stay close, offering his silent presence as comfort. That morning, as he prepared his first meal of the day, Sam noticed that Thunder was restless. The horse was pacing back and forth in the small pasture, his ears alert to sounds the fisherman couldn't perceive. It was as if the animal sensed something in the air. "What's wrong, old boy?" Sam asked, approaching the horse and stroking his neck. "You sense something?" Thunder neighed softly, a sound that expressed concern. His dark eyes turned toward the creek, fixing on the opposite bank, where the vegetation was denser. The fisherman followed the animal's gaze, but saw nothing but the trees swaying lightly in the morning breeze. Their relationship went beyond simple coexistence. Sam had lost his wife, Grace, 3 years earlier to an illness that the region's limited resources couldn't combat. Since then, Thunder had become his only family, filling the void left by loneliness with his loyal and affectionate presence. Unlike horses bred for work, Thunder was never ridden for heavy tasks. Sam treated him as an equal, a friend who deserved respect and affection. Together they would walk the local trails, the fisherman walking alongside the animal while talking about his thoughts and worries. "You know, Thunder, sometimes I think about what it would be like if Grace were still here," Sam would murmur while brushing the horse's white mane. "She always wanted to have kids, but it wasn't meant to be. She used to say our house was too big for just 2 people. The horse would stand still during these moments, as if he understood his companion's melancholy. There was a silent communication between them, based on gestures, looks, and a mutual understanding that needed no words. On that particular morning, however, Thunder showed a different kind of agitation. It wasn't the usual restlessness before a storm, nor the excitement that preceded their morning walks. It was something deeper, more urgent. Sam finished preparing his coffee and went out to the porch, watching the creek flow peacefully under the golden morning light. The water was calm, mirroring the white clouds that floated slowly in the blue sky. It was a scene of absolute peace that contrasted with the growing restlessness of his companion. "Maybe you smell visitors," Sam commented, trying to rationalize the animal's behavior. "It's been a while since anyone came around here." Thunder shook his head, as if disagreeing with the explanation. His hooves tapped nervously on the ground, and he continued to stare intently at the distant bank. The fisherman knew he should trust the animal's sharp instincts, as on other occasions Thunder had shown a perception that went far beyond the ordinary. The distant sound of an engine reached Sam's ears, confirming the horse's suspicion. Someone was indeed approaching the creek, on the opposite side, where there was rarely any movement. The fisherman adjusted his straw hat and decided to discreetly observe who the unexpected visitors might be. He had no idea he was about to witness the beginning of a tragedy that would forever change their quiet lives. Richard dragged the boat to the bank, his expensive leather shoes sinking into the damp mud at the water's edge. The twins watched curiously, still not understanding the gravity of the approaching moment. Clara played with some pebbles she found. On the ground, while Sophie stayed closer to her father, her childish instinct picking up on danger signals her mind couldn't interpret. "Girls, come here," Richard called, his voice sounding forcedly cheerful. "Let's get our little boat ready for the special ride." The children approached, their small, hesitant steps on the uneven ground of the bank. The boat before them was clearly old and battered. The faded blue paint was peeling in several places, revealing the dried-out wood underneath. Small holes were visible in the hull, some patched with pieces of wood that didn't look very secure. "Daddy, the boat is broken," Sophie observed with the typical sincerity of young children. "It's not broken, sweetheart. It's just rustic," Richard lied, avoiding the girl's penetrating gaze. "Fishermen's boats are like this, strong and sturdy." 2 weeks earlier, he had specifically looked for a vessel in this condition. He found Sam mending nets in front of his house and approached him with the story that he was a collector of old boats. He offered a generous price for the deteriorated vessel, explaining that he wanted to restore it as a hobby. Sam had been surprised by the well-dressed man's interest in a boat he himself considered useless. "Sir, this boat isn't even fit for fishing," the honest fisherman had warned. "It has too many holes. The wood is rotten in some places. You'd be better off choosing another one." But Richard insisted, paying in cash a price 3 times what the boat was worth. Sam, though confused, accepted the transaction, using the money to buy materials and repair other boats in the area. He never imagined that boat would be used for something so sinister. Now, watching his young daughters beside the condemned vessel, Richard felt a tightness in his chest that he tried to ignore. Vivian had been clear in her ultimatum. Either he got rid of the complications from his past, or he would lose not only the marriage, but also the social connections essential to keeping his business empire flourishing. "Are we getting in the little boat?" asked Clara, her innocence cutting like a blade through her father's already hardened heart. "Of course, Princess. But first, Daddy needs to explain the rules of the ride," Richard said, kneeling down to the girl's height. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted their yellow dresses. He had deliberately chosen those dresses the morning before, asking them to wear them because they matched the beautiful sunny day. In reality, he knew the vibrant color would make it easier for authorities to locate the bodies when they were called for the search. "The game is like this," he continued, his voice faltering slightly. "You'll get in the little boat and take a ride on the creek. Daddy's going to push the boat for you like a giant toy in the water." "And you're not coming with us?" Sophie asked, her expression showing concern. "Daddy needs to stay here on the shore, organizing other surprises for you," Richard lied. "But you're brave girls, aren't you? You'll love the ride by yourselves." The twins exchanged uncertain glances. Even at just 4 years old, something in their father's words sounded strange. They always did everything together, but never without an adult supervision. The idea of being alone in a boat on the water made them apprehensive. "We don't want to go alone," said Clara, holding her sister's hand. "We want to stay with Daddy," Sophie added. Richard felt a pang of what might have been remorse, but Vivian's voice echoed in his mind. Choose, Richard. It's either them or me. I can't pretend to accept your bastards forever. Girls, Daddy promises it will be fun, he insisted, lifting Clara into his arms and placing her inside the boat. See, there's even a comfy spot for you to sit. Sophie reluctantly allowed her father to place her next to her sister. The two huddled together, their big, frightened eyes watching the water around the boat. Now hold on tight to the sides, Richard instructed, starting to push the vessel away from the bank. And remember, you are the bravest girls in the world. His words sounded like a final farewell, laden with an emotion he was desperately trying to suppress as the leaky boat began its fatal journey down the creek. The boat glided smoothly over the calm water, moving away from the bank with a deceptive tranquility. Clara and Sophie, still not understanding the real danger of the situation, clapped their hands and laughed as they felt the boat's movement on the water. To them, it all seemed like a different kind of game, just as their father had promised. "Look, Clara, we're flying on the water," exclaimed Sophie, pointing to the small whirlpools forming around the boat. "It's like we're mermaids," her sister replied, leaning over to touch the liquid surface with her small fingers. Richard remained on the bank, watching his daughters drift away. His breathing was ragged, and he constantly wiped the sweat from his hands on the expensive fabric of his dress pants. A tiny part of his conscience screamed at him to run after the boat, but he forced himself to stay still. "Daddy! Daddy, look how fun this is!" Clara shouted, waving energetically at her father. The man waved back, but his smile was forced and his eyes revealed an anguish he was desperately trying to hide. Each joyful shout from the girls was like a stab in his chest, but he remembered Vivian's harsh words. "They are obstacles, Richard. Obstacles preventing our complete happiness." As the boat moved further from the bank, the creek's current began to exert its silent force. What looked like still water on the surface hid a powerful undercurrent that pulled any object towards the deepest part of the channel. Richard knew this. He had carefully studied the local geography during his 2 weeks of planning. Initially, the twins didn't. Notice they were being carried by the current. They continued to play, creating imaginary stories about golden fish and underwater castles. Sophie hummed a song their mother used to sing at bedtime, while Clara tried to fish with her small hands. It was Sophie who first noticed something was wrong. "Clara, why is Daddy getting so small?" she asked, pointing to Richard's distant figure on the bank. Clara looked back and saw that they were indeed very far from land. Suddenly, the game didn't seem so fun anymore. "Daddy, come back!" she yelled, starting to feel the first signs of fear. "We want to come back, Daddy!" Sophie joined in, her voice taking on a panicked tone. Richard, even from a distance, could hear his daughter's cries change from joy to desperation. He clenched his fists, forcing himself not to react. "It's for the best," he muttered to himself, repeating the words Vivian had planted in his mind. In the boat, the girls began to notice their feet were wet. Clara looked down and saw small puddles of water forming at the bottom of the vessel. "Sophie, there's water coming in!" she exclaimed, her voice revealing growing panic. "The boat is filling up!" Sophie screamed, trying to scoop the water out with her small hands. The holes in the hull, which Richard had noticed but purposely ignored, began to let in water as the pressure increased. What were just small drips at the shallow bank turned into steady streams as the boat reached deeper water. The twins tried to plug the holes with their hands, but it was impossible. For every hole one managed to cover, 2 others let in more water. Their yellow dresses began to get soaked, and the weight of the water made their movements more difficult. "Daddy! Daddy! Help!" They screamed in unison, their voices echoing across the expanse of the creek. Richard, on the bank, heard the desperate cries but turned his back, walking towards his truck. Every step was a struggle against his own paternal instincts, but he forced himself to keep going. "I can't look back," he muttered. "If I look, I won't be able to leave." In the boat, The water level was rising quickly. The girls hugged each other, shivering from cold and terror. Clara was crying profusely, while Sophie tried to be brave, but her tears also began to fall. "I want Mommy," Clara sobbed. "I want Mommy too," Sophie replied, holding her sister tightly. The current carried them further and further away, towards a bend in the creek where the vegetation became denser and wilder. The boat, now with nearly 4 inches of water at the bottom, rocked dangerously with every movement of the terrified children. On the other side of the creek, Thunder had started to gallop nervously along the bank, his loud neighs cutting through the morning air. The horse had witnessed the entire scene, and his extreme agitation finally caught the attention of Sam, who ran out of his house to see what was disturbing his companion so much. What the fisherman saw when he reached the bank left him horrified. Sam ran to the bank, following Thunder's desperate neighs. What he saw left him completely paralyzed. 2 small children in a boat that was clearly sinking, being carried away by the current down the creek. Their cries for help echoed across the water, but there was no sign of the adult responsible for them. "Good Lord!" exclaimed the fisherman, running his hands through his graying hair. "Where did these children come from?" Thunder galloped back and forth on the bank, clearly agitated. The horse neighed loudly, as if trying to communicate with the girls from a distance, or perhaps to alert his owner to the urgency of the situation. His dark eyes were fixed on the boat that was rapidly moving away. Sam looked around, searching for an adult, someone responsible for the children. On the other side of the creek, he could glimpse a male figure walking towards a vehicle, but the distance was too great to be sure if there was any connection to the girls in danger. "Hey! Hey!" Sam yelled, waving his arms to get the distant man's attention. "There are children in the creek!" Richard vaguely heard the shout, but didn't turn around. His pace quickened toward the truck, every fiber of his being fighting the urge to look back. He knew if he saw his daughters one last time, he wouldn't be able to complete his terrible plan. In the creek, the twins' situation was deteriorating rapidly. The water in the boat was already up to their knees, and they could no longer stand. Sitting at the bottom of the vessel, holding each other, they continued to cry for help with their increasingly weak, childish voices. "Sophie, I'm so scared," Clara whimpered, her little teeth chattering from the cold. "Me too, but we have to be brave," her sister replied, trying to stay calm despite the terror she felt. "Someone will help us." Thunder, realizing his owner seemed hesitant or confused about what to do, made a decision that surprised even Sam. The horse headed directly for the bank and, without any hesitation, plunged into the waters of the creek. "Thunder, no!" Sam shouted, alarmed. "The current is too strong." But the horse was already swimming with determination toward the sinking boat. His powerful legs cut through the water efficiently, and his white head remained held high, focused on his goal. It was as if the animal understood the gravity of the situation exactly and had decided to act when the humans had failed. Sam was torn between following Thunder to help him and running to get his own canoe. The boat was on the other side of his property, and the time it would take to fetch it could be crucial. He decided to trust his companion's instincts and ran to get the canoe. Meanwhile, the girls in the boat noticed the white horse approaching. Initially, they were even more frightened. It was a large, unknown animal coming toward them, but something in Thunder's gentle eyes instinctively reassured them. "Look, Clara, a horse in the water," Sophie exclaimed, momentarily forgetting her fear. "He's beautiful," Clara whispered, extending a small hand toward the approaching animal. Thunder reached the boat just as the water inside the vessel hit a dangerous level. With an intelligence that bordered on miraculous, the horse positioned himself alongside the boat and began to push it with his muzzle toward the nearest bank. The girls felt the boat change direction and understood that the horse was trying to save them. They clung to the sides of the vessel as Thunder used all his strength to fight against the current. "The little horse is helping us," Clara shouted, a spark of hope lighting up her frightened eyes. "He's a hero horse," Sophie agreed, stroking the animal's wet neck as he came alongside the boat. Sam, running back with his canoe on his shoulders, saw the extraordinary scene. His horse had managed to stop the boat's downstream movement and was slowly pushing it toward the safe bank. It was a spectacle of courage and determination that left him deeply moved. "That's it, old boy. Bring them here," the fisherman shouted, putting his canoe in the water to join the rescue effort. On the other side of the creek, Richard finally started the truck's engine. The sound of the motor drowned out his daughter's last cries, allowing him to leave without hearing if his plan had worked. As he drove away, a single tear rolled down his face, but he quickly wiped it away. "It's for the best," he repeated like a mantra, pressing his foot hard on the accelerator. But Thunder had other plans for those two small lives, and his heroic determination was about to turn a certain tragedy into a miracle of survival. Thunder fought the current with a determination that impressed even Sam, who knew his companion's strength and intelligence well. The horse positioned himself strategically beside the sinking boat, using his body as a barrier against the force of the water while pushing the vessel toward the safe bank. The twins, still huddled at the bottom of the soaked boat, watched the animal's dedication with fascination. Clara reached out her small hand to touch Thunder's wet mane, while Sophie whispered words of encouragement as if the horse could understand. And them. "Come on, pretty horsey, you can do it," Sophie murmured, her voice weak but full of hope. Sam rowed furiously in his canoe, closing in on the group. His experienced hands cut through the water with precision, his muscles burning with effort, driven by an urgency that went beyond reason. 20 yards, 15, 10. "Hold on tight, girls, I'm coming!" the fisherman shouted, his voice filled with determination. When he finally reached the boat, Sam saw the children's condition up close, soaked, shivering with cold and terror, but miraculously alive. Their yellow dresses were stuck to their small bodies, and their large eyes reflected a mix of fear and relief at the sight of an adult finally coming to their rescue. "Don't be afraid, I'm going to get you out of there," Sam said with a gentle voice, reaching out his arms to grab Clara first. The girl hesitated for a moment, looking at her sister and then at the stranger offering help. But something in the fisherman's kind face reassured her, and she allowed him to lift her into his arms, transferring her to his safe canoe. "Now you, little one," Sam said to Sophie, who was clinging to the sides of the boat, which was now almost completely submerged. "What about the horsey?" Sophie asked, worried about Thunder, who remained in the water beside them. "He's an excellent swimmer, don't you worry," Sam reassured her, pulling the second girl into the safety of his vessel as well. With both children finally safe, Sam quickly rowed toward the bank, closely followed by Thunder, who swam alongside. The canoe like a vigilant guardian. The leaky boat finally succumbed completely to the water, disappearing beneath the surface with a final gurgle that marked the end of Richard's attempted murder. Once on solid ground, Sam carried the girls out of the water, placing them on the soft grass of the bank. They immediately hugged each other, trembling violently from the cold and shock. Thunder emerged from the water, shaking his white mane, and approached the children as if to personally check if they were okay. "You're safe now," Sam said, taking off his dry shirt to wrap around the girls. "But tell me, where are your parents? Who brought you here?" Clara and Sophie looked at each other, their young minds trying to process what had happened. The traumatic experience had been too confusing for them to explain clearly. "Daddy brought us," Clara said in a small voice. "He said it would be fun," Sophie added, starting to cry again. "And where is your daddy now?" Sam asked, looking around and noticing there were no other adults in the area. "He left," Clara replied, pointing vaguely in the direction where they had last seen Richard. "He left and left you alone in the boat?" Sam asked, a terrible suspicion beginning to form in his mind. The girls nodded, their big eyes filled with confusion and hurt. They didn't understand why their father had left, why he had abandoned them in a boat that was filling with water. To their innocent minds, perhaps it really was a game that had gone wrong. Sam felt anger rising in his chest. As a potential father who never had the chance to be one, the idea of someone abandoning small children in such a dangerous situation revolted him. But first, he needed to care for the girls, who were clearly in shock. "Let's go home," he said gently, picking up Clara while Sophie clung to his leg. "I'll make you something warm to drink and get you some dry clothes." Thunder followed them in silence, occasionally touching the girls gently with his muzzle, as if to comfort them. The horse seemed to understand that he had saved 2 precious lives, and his posture showed a quiet pride mixed with a protective tenderness. As they walked toward Sam's simple house, the fisherman couldn't stop thinking about the situation. 2 small children abandoned in a leaky boat by someone who should have protected them. The suspicion growing in his mind was so terrible, he preferred not to believe it. But the evidence was there, wet and shivering in his arms. Someone had tried to kill these 2 little angels, and only Thunder's miraculous intervention had prevented an irreversible tragedy. Inside Sam's cozy house, the twins were wrapped in warm towels, sipping sweet tea the fisherman had lovingly prepared. Thunder lay near the fireplace, his watchful eyes never leaving the girls he had saved. It was as if the horse had taken on the role of their permanent guardian. Clara and Sophie began to calm down in the warmth and safety of the simple house. The wooden walls, decorated with photos of Sam and his late wife, created a familiar atmosphere that soothed them. There was something about the fisherman's gentle manner that made them feel protected. "What are your names, little ones?" Sam asked, sitting on a low stool to be at their level. "I'm Clara," said the first, pointing to herself. "And I'm Sophie," completed the second, showing a shy smile. "Clara and Sophie," Sam repeated, memorizing the names. "And what's your family name, your last name?" The girls looked at each other, confused. At only 4 years old, the concept of a last name was still hazy for them. They knew their first names, but when it came to full identification, they always relied on adults. "We don't know," Clara admitted, shrugging her little shoulders. Sam tried a different approach. "And what's your daddy's name? What do you call him?" "Daddy!" they both answered in unison, as if it were obvious. The fisherman sighed, realizing it would be difficult to get accurate information from such young children. But there was something that deeply bothered him. About the whole situation, he decided to try to better understand what had happened. "Tell me about your ride today," he said softly. "Did your daddy say anything special?" Sophie frowned, concentrating to remember. "He said it was going to be a ride we'd never forget, and that the little boat would take us on a great adventure," Clara added. "Did he get in the boat with you?" Sam asked, though he already suspected the answer. "No," Sophie said, shaking her head. "He said he had to stay on the shore, organizing surprises. And then he pushed the boat away from the land," Clara continued, her voice growing quieter with the memory. A chill ran down Sam's spine. With every detail the girls revealed, the terrible truth became clearer. This man had deliberately abandoned his young daughters in a boat he knew was leaky. It wasn't an accident, it was attempted murder. "And Daddy stayed there on the shore when you left?" Sam insisted, needing to confirm his suspicions. "He stayed," Sophie confirmed. "We yelled for him, but he didn't come. He left in the big truck," Clara added, her innocent words revealing the monstrosity of her father's act. Sam stood up abruptly, walking to the window to control his rising anger. How could anyone do this to their own daughters? Children so small, so defenseless, who trusted blindly in the father who should have protected them above all else. Thunder lifted his head, sensing his owner's agitation. The horse approached Sam and touched his shoulder gently with his muzzle, as if to console him or remind him that he had managed to save the girls in time. "You did the right thing, old boy," Sam murmured, stroking the horse's neck. "If it weren't for you—" He couldn't complete the sentence. The thought of what would have happened if Thunder hadn't acted was too terrible to contemplate. In that moment, Sam made a decision that would change his life forever. He couldn't just hand these children back to a man who had tried to kill them. He needed to protect them, but he also needed help to deal with such a complex legal situation. "Girls," he said, turning to them with determination, "you're going to stay here with me for a while, okay? Until I figure out how to find someone in your family who can take proper care of you." "And will Thunder stay too?" Clara asked, reaching a hand out to the horse. "Of course he will," Sam replied, smiling for the first time since the rescue. "Thunder is your hero. He'll always be here to protect you." The twins exchanged glances and smiled, feeling safe for the first time since they had been put in the leaky boat. They didn't fully understand what had happened, but they knew instinctively that they were in a safe place. Sam, however, knew the challenges were just beginning. Somewhere out there, a dangerous man believed he had gotten rid of his daughters forever, and when he found out they had survived, he would surely try something more drastic. The fisherman looked at the two girls dozing on the couch, embraced, protected by Thunder's vigilant gaze. He had become, without planning it, the guardian of two precious lives, and he was willing to fight anyone who tried to hurt them again. The battle for Clara and Sophie's life and safety was just beginning. 3 days passed, and Sam's quiet routine had been completely transformed. The twins brought new life to his silent house, filling it with childish laughter and curious questions about everything around them. Clara and Sophie had quickly adapted to the fisherman's gentle presence and Thunder's protective company. During these days, Sam tried discreetly to get more information about the girls' identity, but without success. They only knew their first names and spoke vaguely about a mommy who was far away. The fisherman began to consider contacting the local authorities, but hesitated, fearing the children would be returned to the man who had tried to kill them. On that Thursday morning, while preparing breakfast for the girls, Sam heard the distant sound of engines approaching. It was unusual for there to be traffic in that isolated area, especially so early. Thunder, who was grazing near the house, abruptly lifted his head, his ears alert to the approaching sounds. "Girls, stay inside and play," Sam instructed, trying to keep his voice calm. "Don't leave the house, okay?" Clara and Sophie, who were playing with some makeshift toys Sam had carved from wood, nodded obediently. In the past few days, they had learned to trust the kind fisherman who had taken them in completely. Sam went out onto the porch and saw 2 black SUVs approaching on the dirt road. The vehicles were expensive and completely out of place in the rural simplicity of the region. When they stopped in front of his property, 4 men got out, all dressed in city clothes and with serious expressions. Thunder immediately galloped close to Sam, positioning himself between his owner and the unwanted visitors. The horse was clearly agitated, as if sensing danger. "Good morning," said the man who appeared to be the leader, a tall, thin man with dark sunglasses. "We're looking for 2 children who went missing in the area a few days ago." Sam's heart pounded, but he kept his expression neutral. "Missing children? Haven't seen any kids around here. 2 twin girls, about 4 years old," the man continued, studying Sam's reaction. "They were with their father on a boat trip and got lost on the creek. The family is desperate." "What a tragedy," Sam replied, choosing his words carefully. "But like I said, I haven't seen any children, This area is very isolated. One of the other men stepped forward, his posture intimidating. Sir, we have information that someone may have seen 2 children in the creek area in the last few days. Would it be possible for us to take a look around your property? A drop of sweat ran down Sam's back. These men didn't look like police officers or firefighters on a legitimate search. There was something sinister about their manner, something that confirmed his worst suspicions about their true intentions toward the girls. I have nothing to hide, he said, trying to buy time, but I also don't like strangers trespassing on my property without an official warrant. Do you have any identification? The leader smiled coldly. I'm private investigators hired by the family. We don't need an official warrant to ask questions. Thunder began to pace nervously, his hooves thudding rhythmically on the ground. The horse clearly disliked these men, and his agitation was growing. By the moment, "Well, look at that," said another man, pointing to the horse. "What a beautiful animal. I bet he knows the whole area well, doesn't he? Horses have excellent memories." The implied threat in the observation did not go unnoticed by Sam. They were hinting that they knew Thunder had witnessed something important. "My horse is just a companion animal," Sam replied firmly. "And now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." He turned to go inside, but the leader called out to him again. "Sir, I'm sure you understand the gravity of the situation. 2 small children lost in a dangerous area like this. Any information, no matter how small, could save their lives." Sam stopped at the door, feeling the weight of the men's gazes on him. Inside the house, he could hear the low whispers of Clara and Sophie, who had likely sensed the tension in the adults' voices. "If I knew anything about missing children," he said slowly, "I would certainly inform the proper authorities. Firefighters, the police, the real people in charge of finding missing children." The ensuing silence was tense and fraught with unspoken threats. Sam could feel that these men were not who they seemed, and their presence confirmed that the twins were in mortal danger. "Very well," the leader finally said, adjusting his sunglasses. "But we'll be in the area for a few more days. If you happen to remember anything at all, it would be good to let us know." They returned to their vehicles, but before leaving, the last man turned and looked directly at the house window, where a small shadow had quickly moved back behind the curtain. Sam noticed the glance and felt a chill. They knew. Somehow these men knew the girls were there, and now it was only a matter of time before they returned with a more aggressive plan. When the vehicles finally drove away, kicking up a cloud of dust on the road, Sam quickly went inside. Clara and Sophie were waiting for him with worried expressions. "Who were the bad men?" asked Sophie, who had peeked through the window. The innocent question confirmed Sam's worst fears. Even at such a young age, the girls had instinctively identified those men as a threat. 200 miles away, Marina Santos was sitting by her mother's hospital bed when her phone rang for the 10th time that day. Richard's name appeared on the screen, but she had decided not to answer his calls anymore. For the past 3 days, he had been strangely insistent, constantly asking about her plans to return. "Marina, you need to take that call," said her sister Carla, who had arrived, to help with their mother's care. "He's been calling since yesterday. It might be something important about the girls." Marina sighed and finally answered the phone. "Hi, Richard. Sorry I didn't answer earlier, but things are complicated here." "Marina!" Richard's voice sounded desperate, almost hysterical. "You need to come back now. Something terrible has happened." "To the girls!" Marina's blood ran cold. "What do you mean? What happened to Clara and Sophie?" They're lost," Richard stammered. "I took them for a ride on the creek and there was an accident. The boat capsized and they disappeared into the water." Marina felt the world spin around her. Her legs grew weak and she had to lean on the chair. "What do you mean, disappeared? Where were you? Why weren't you in the boat with them?" I was on the bank getting other things ready, Richard lied, his rehearsed story sounding false. It happened so fast. The boat drifted away, and by the time I realized, you left 2 4-year-old children alone in a boat. Marina's voice rose, attracting the attention of other family members in the hospital hallway. How could you do such a thing? It was an accident, Marina. Do you think I would do anything to hurt my own daughters? The forced indignation in Richard's voice couldn't hide his guilt. Marina began to cry uncontrollably. Where are they now? Did the firefighters find them? Did you call the police? I have a private search team on it, Richard replied quickly. Very competent professionals. I didn't want to involve the police yet to avoid complications. Complications, Marina screamed. My daughters are missing and you're worried about complications. I'm coming back right now. No, Marina, it's better if you stay there and take care of your mother. I'll handle everything here. When there's news, I'll call you. But Marina had already hung up. Her hands trembled as she quickly packed her things. Carla watched her with growing concern. What happened? What's wrong with the girls? They're missing, Marina said between sobs. Richard says there was an accident on the creek. I have to go back now. Calm down, Marina, Carla said, grabbing her sister by the shoulders. Let's think clearly. This doesn't make any sense. Richard is a lot of things, but he's never been one to take the girls to dangerous places. Marina stopped packing and looked at her sister. Carla was right. In all the years she had known Richard, he had always been extremely cautious about outdoor activities. He always said he'd rather save the adventures for when the girls were older. Why would he take them on a boat trip? Marina murmured, starting to notice the inconsistencies in the story. He's afraid of water. He never even learned to swim properly. And why didn't he call the police immediately? Carla added. When a child goes missing, the first thing any parent does is call the authorities. The two sisters looked at each other, a terrible suspicion beginning to form between them. Marina had known Richard for years, knew his ambitions, his obsession with social status. He had recently married a high society woman who had never shown any affection for the girls. Carla, Marina said in a fearful voice, do you think he would be capable of... Let's not go there right now, Carla interrupted, but her face was pale. Let's go. We need to see the situation with our own eyes. Marina finished packing in a few minutes. She quickly explained to the medical staff that she had to travel for a family emergency and that Carla would be in charge of their mother. During the 5-hour drive back, Marina couldn't stop thinking. Every mile driven increased her suspicions. Why did Richard seem more nervous than desperate? Why did he insist she not come back? Why not involve the police? When she finally arrived in town, Marina went directly to Richard's house. She found him in his office, on the phone with someone, speaking in a low voice. When he saw her, he became visibly flustered. Marina, I didn't expect you back so soon. Where exactly did the accident happen? She asked, directly, without preamble. I want to go to the site. That's not a good idea, Richard said quickly. It's too upsetting. Besides, my search team is working there. Your search team? Marina frowned. Who are these people? Why not the firefighters or the police? Richard hesitated, realizing he had contradicted himself. They're private investigators, more efficient than the local authorities. Marina stared at him, seeing through his lies for the first time. Richard, look me in the eyes and tell me the truth. What really happened to my daughters? The silence that followed was deafening. Richard looked away, unable to bear the weight of her direct question. In that moment, Marina knew her worst. Suspicions were true. Her daughters hadn't been lost in an accident. They had been victims of something far more sinister, and the man who was supposed to protect them above all else was responsible for their disappearance. Back at Sam's house, the tension was palpable. The fisherman had spent the previous night planning how to protect the twins, knowing the threatening men would soon return. Clara and Sophie slept peacefully in the makeshift room he had prepared, unaware of the danger surrounding them. Thunder remained alert on the porch, his sharp senses picking up any suspicious movement in the area. The horse had become a true guardian, constantly patrolling the property's surroundings. That morning, Sam decided to seek help. He knew John Rivers, a neighbor who lived a mile up the creek, a trustworthy man who had always been supportive of the local community. If anyone could help him protect the girls, it would be John. "Girls, you're going to stay here with Thunder while Uncle Sam goes to talk to a friend," he explained, helping them dress in clothes he had improvised from clean fabrics. "Will you be long?" Clara asked, instinctively holding Sophie's hand. "No, little one. And if anyone comes here, you hide behind the house and stay very quiet until I get back. Deal?" The girls nodded seriously. In the past few days, they had learned that certain situations required absolute obedience, even without fully understanding the reasons. Sam mounted Thunder and set off toward John's property. The horse galloped with urgency, as if he understood the importance of the mission. The rural landscape passed by quickly, but Sam couldn't appreciate the morning beauty due to his constant worry. John Rivers was mending a fence when he saw Sam approaching. A 60-year-old man, a lifelong farmer, he possessed the practical wisdom of someone who had faced many hardships and always prided himself on helping his neighbors in times of need. "Sam, what an unexpected visit," John greeted, wiping his dirty hands on his shirt. "The way you're riding, it must be something important." "John, I need your help urgently," Sam said, dismounting quickly. "It's a very serious situation involving two little girls." Sam told him the whole story, the rescue in the creek, the suspicions, about the attempted murder, the visit from the threatening men. John listened in silence, his face hardening as he understood the gravity of the situation. "Good Lord, Sam," John murmured when his friend finished. "This is much more serious than I imagined. Those kids are in real danger. I need help protecting them, John. Those men will be back, I'm sure of it, and next time they won't take no for an answer." John thought for a few moments, then nodded with determination. "You did the right thing saving them, Sam, and you can count on me to help protect them. There's one more thing," Sam continued. "I need to contact the real authorities, the police, social services, someone who can officially investigate and protect these girls." "I know the sheriff in the next town over," John said. "An honest man, a family man. If we explain the situation to him, I'm sure he'll help us." Just then, they heard the distant sound of approaching engines. Sam and John exchanged worried glances. It was too early for social calls, and the direction of the sound indicated the vehicles were coming from Sam's property. "They're back," Sam muttered, quickly mounting Thunder. "I have to get back to protect the girls." "Wait," John said, running inside his house. He returned with a shotgun and some shells. "Take this. If they try anything violent, you defend yourself." Sam hesitated. He had never been a violent man, but the image of the defenseless twins in his house made him accept the weapon. "Thanks, John. Can you go to town and tell the sheriff?" "I'm on my way," John confirmed, running to his own truck. "Hold them off until I get back with backup." Sam galloped back home, his heart pounding. Thunder galloped like never before, seeming to understand that his little charges were in danger. As they approached the property, they saw the two black SUVs parked in front of the house. Sam dismounted at a safe distance and approached silently through the vegetation. He could hear male voices coming from inside his house, and the sound made his blood boil. These men had invaded his property and were threatening two innocent children. "We know they're here," a rough voice said. "We found kids' tracks in the yard, little footprints in the mud." "I don't know what you're talking about," replied a small, brave voice that Sam recognized as Sophie's. His heart tightened as he realized the girls hadn't managed to hide in time. They were alone with these dangerous men, facing a situation no child should ever have to experience. Sam checked the shotgun, making sure it was loaded. Thunder stood beside him, tense and ready to act. It was time to protect his little ones, no matter the cost. Taking a deep breath, he prepared to confront the men who had invaded his home and were threatening two little angels who had already suffered enough trauma. The battle for Clara and Sophie's safety was about to begin, and Sam was determined to win. With Thunder by his side and the certainty that John would bring official help, the fisherman prepared for the confrontation that could determine the fate of the two children who already held a special place in his heart. Sam approached his own house like an intruder, moving silently between the trees. Through the window, he could see 4 men inside his living room, with Clara and Sophie sitting together on the couch, huddled and clearly frightened. The sight of the terrified girls awakened a protective fury he had never felt before. "Girls, you're going to tell us where the man who lives here is," said the group's leader, crouching in front of the twins. "He might be hiding you, and that's very dangerous." "Uncle Sam is nice," replied Clara in a fearful but brave voice. "He saved us from the water." "Saved you from the water?" The man exchanged a meaningful glance with his companions. "So you remember what happened on the creek?" Sophie nodded slowly. "Daddy left and put us in the broken boat. We yelled, but he didn't come back." The silence that followed was tense. The men clearly hadn't expected the girls to be able to articulate what had happened so clearly. It was evident that Richard had underestimated his daughter's ability to comprehend and report the situation. "The white horse saved us," Clara added, pointing through the window where Thunder could be seen in the distance. "He swam in the water and brought us to the shore." Sam realized the men were getting nervous with the girls' revelations. They were living witnesses to an attempted murder, and their clear memories of their father's abandonment posed a real threat to Richard. "Where is this man who lives here?" another henchman insisted, his patience clearly wearing thin. "We don't know," Sophie replied, and it was true. The girls didn't know where Sam had gone. At that moment, Sam decided to act. He couldn't allow these men to continue intimidating 2 defenseless children in his own home. He moved to the front door, holding the shotgun firmly. "Get out of my house now!" Sam shouted, appearing on the doorstep with the weapon aimed. The men spun around quickly, some reaching for their own weapons. The tension in the room became explosive, with Clara and Sophie shrinking further into the couch. "Easy, old man," the leader said, slowly raising his hands. "We just want to talk about the kids." "Talk? After breaking into my property and terrorizing 2 little girls?" Sam kept the gun steady. "Get out of here before I call the cops." "The police are already on their way," Sam bluffed, hoping John had managed to contact the sheriff. "Sir, you don't understand," another henchman tried. "These children were kidnapped from their parents. We're here to take them back to their family." "Liar!" Sophie shouted unexpectedly. "Daddy is mean. He put us in the broken boat and left." "Uncle Sam is nice," Clara added. "He takes care of us." The innocent but devastating statements from the girls completely changed the dynamic of the situation. It was impossible to keep pretending this was a legitimate rescue when the supposed victims themselves were denouncing their father and defending their protector. At that moment, Thunder appeared at the door behind Sam. The horse had sensed the tension and had come to check on the situation. His imposing protective presence added another intimidating element to the standoff. "That's the horse who saved us," Clara exclaimed, finding courage in the presence of the heroic animal. The leader of the henchmen realized the situation had become irreversibly complicated. The girls were too clear as witnesses, their memories too detailed. It wouldn't be possible to simply take them away without causing even more trouble for Richard. "This isn't over," he threatened, signaling for the others to retreat. "We'll be back." "I'll be waiting," Sam replied firmly. "And next time the police will be too." The men left the house slowly, their expressions a mix of frustration and anger. Sam kept the gun pointed until they got into their vehicles and drove off down the dirt road. When they were finally alone, Clara and Sophie ran to Sam, hugging his legs tightly. They were trembling with fear and relief at the same time. "Uncle Sam, they were bad men," Sophie said, burying her face in the fisherman's leg. "We don't want to see them again," Clara added, crying softly. Sam knelt to the girls' level, hugging them tenderly. "Don't you worry, little ones. I won't let anyone hurt you, I promise." Thunder approached and gently nudged each of the girls with his muzzle, as if to console them and reaffirm his protection. The horse had become more than a pet. He was a true guardian of the makeshift family that had formed in that simple house. Sam knew this wouldn't be the last attempt to take the girls, but now he was absolutely certain he was on the right side of the fight. Clara and Sophie were victims of a monstrosity he would never allow to be consummated. The war for the twins' safety had officially begun, and Sam was prepared to fight to the end. 2 hours after the confrontation, the sound of sirens echoed through the isolated region. John had managed to contact not only the sheriff, but also a team from Child Protective Services and a detective specializing in crimes against children. The caravan of official vehicles that approached Sam's house brought both relief and apprehension. Marina had spent the previous night investigating on her own. After confronting Richard about the inconsistencies in his story, she decided to go to the area of the supposed accident. That's when she ran into the officers John had alerted and learned about 2 girls who had been rescued by a local fisherman. Now, she was sitting in Sam's modest living room, seeing her daughters for the first time in a week. Clara and Sophie recognized her immediately, running into her arms with shouts of joy and relief. "Mommy! Mommy!" the twins cried in unison, clinging to Marina as if they feared she would disappear again. "My sweet babies," Marina whispered, kissing their small tear-streaked faces. "Mommy's here now. Everything's going to be okay." Detective Helen Pierce, an experienced woman in her 50s and a mother of 3, watched the family reunion with restrained emotion. She had seen many difficult cases in her career, but the twins' situation touched her in a special way. "Mrs. Santos," the detective said softly, "I need to talk to the girls about what happened. I know it's difficult, but it's necessary to ensure their safety." Marina nodded, though her maternal instinct made her want to shield her daughters from more questioning. "They can talk, they're smart girls." The detective knelt in front of Clara and Sophie, who remained glued to their mother, but looked curiously at the uniformed woman. "Hello, girls. I'm Detective Pierce. Can you tell me what happened on the day of the boat trip?" Sophie, always the more observant one, looked to her mother for approval. Marina nodded encouragingly. "Daddy took us to a place with trees and a creek," Sophie began slowly. "He put us in an ugly boat and pushed it far away." "And where did Daddy go when he pushed the boat?" the detective asked carefully. "He left in the big truck," Clara answered. "We yelled, 'Daddy, Daddy,' but he didn't come back. Water came in the boat through the little holes," Sophie continued. "We were really scared." Marina felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to her daughter's simple yet devastating account. The reality of what Richard had tried to do was even more terrible, heard through the girl's innocent words. "And who helped you?" the detective asked. "Thunder!" they both exclaimed, pointing to the horse who remained near the window. "Thunder is my horse," explained Sam, who had remained respectfully silent during the questioning. He saw the girls in danger and swam to the boat to save them. The detective took detailed notes, documenting every aspect of the account. The clarity of the girls' memories, despite their young age, provided solid evidence against Richard. "Mr. Jones," the detective said, "did you have any contact with the girl's father before the incident?" "Yes," Sam confirmed. "He came here 2 weeks ago wanting to buy an old boat I had, a leaky, useless boat. He offered 3 times what it was worth." "And did you find that strange?" "Very. I warned him the boat wasn't even fit for fishing, but he insisted, said he wanted to restore it as a hobby." Marina interrupted, her voice filled with pain and anger. "He planned everything. 2 weeks of planning to kill his own daughters." The detective turned to Marina. "Ma'am, we'll need your full statement about the girl's father's recent behavior, especially regarding possible motives." Marina took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "Richard married a high society woman 6 months ago. Vivian always made it clear she didn't accept the girls, that they were baggage from the past. Lately, he'd been very stressed, saying he had to make some hard choices. The girls were in the way of his new life," Sam murmured, his voice thick with disgust. At that moment, Clara got up from her mother's lap and walked over to Sam. At 4 years old, she didn't fully understand the legal implications of the situation, but she knew how to recognize kindness. "Uncle Sam," she said, holding the fisherman's large, calloused hand, "are you still going to take care of us?" The innocent question touched everyone present. Sam knelt to the girl's level, his emotions nearly overwhelming his voice. "Sweetheart, your mommy is here now. She's the one who's going to take care of you," he replied tenderly. "But can you be our grandpa?" Sophie asked, joining the conversation. "We don't have a grandpa." Marina looked at Sam with deep gratitude. "Mr. Jones, I don't know how to thank you for what you did for my daughters. You literally saved their lives." "It wasn't just me," Sam said, looking at Thunder. "It was mostly him. Thunder is the one who deserves the credit for the rescue." The detective closed her notebook, satisfied with the evidence she had gathered. "We have enough to arrest Richard Montgomery immediately. Attempted murder of a minor under his care." Marina hugged her daughters tighter, finally allowing herself to feel relief. The truth was out. The girls were safe, and the man who had tried to destroy their innocent lives would finally face the consequences of his monstrous acts. The terrifying journey was over, but a new story of family, protection, and true love was just beginning. 3 days later, Richard Montgomery was found in his luxurious office trying to shred documents that proved the purchase of the leaky boat. The arrest was swift and efficient. When the officers arrived, he was on the phone with Vivian, planning an international trip to forget the tragedy of the lost daughters. In court, 2 weeks after his arrest, Richard finally faced the consequences of his actions. Marina was present, as was Sam, who had been called as a key witness. Clara and Sophie were kept in the care of a child psychologist during the trial, but their recorded statements were presented as crucial evidence. The prosecutor, an experienced man named Mark Davis, presented the case with clinical precision. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we have before us one of the most heinous crimes this court has ever tried. A father who deliberately attempted to murder his own 4-year-old daughters." The evidence was overwhelming. Sam's testimony about the suspicious boat purchase, the girl's statements about the abandonment, phone records showing Richard had not called authorities, and above all, Marina's testimony about Vivian's pressure to solve the problem of the children. When it was his turn to testify, Richard tried to stick to his original story. "It was a terrible accident. I would never harm my daughters." But the prosecutor was prepared. "Mr. Montgomery, why did you specifically buy a leaky boat? Why did you pay 3 times its market value for a vessel the seller himself said was useless?" Richard hesitated, his confidence faltering. I wanted to restore it. Restore a boat that you put your daughters in on the very day you bought it, without making a single repair." Richard's silence was deafening. Marina was called to the stand, and her controlled emotion impressed the entire court. "My daughters trusted him completely. When Sophie told me Daddy left and put us in the boat, She didn't understand she was describing an attempted murder. To her, it was just confusion about why her father had gone. Sam also testified, his simple honesty a stark contrast to Richard's elaborate lies. "Your Honor, when I sold him that boat, I warned him it wasn't even fit for fishing. No responsible person would ever put small children in a vessel like that." The most impactful moment of the trial came when the recordings of the girls' statements were played. Their childish voices, innocent but clear, describing their father's abandonment, deeply moved everyone present. "Daddy put us in the boat and left," echoed Clara's voice through the silent courtroom. "We yelled, but he didn't come back." When Vivian was called to testify, her indirect role in the crime became evident. Under cross-examination, she admitted to constantly pressuring Richard to deal with the situation of the bastards, but denied knowing his specific plans. "I just said I couldn't keep pretending to accept those children," she declared coldly. A man in Richard's position shouldn't have complications from the past holding back his future. Her words caused visible outrage among the jury and in the gallery. The defense attorney tried to argue that Richard had suffered a nervous breakdown due to social pressure, but the evidence of premeditation was irrefutable. The advance purchase of the leaky boat, the 2 weeks of planning, the choice of an isolated location, everything pointed to a cold, calculated crime. In the final moment of the trial, when Judge Robert Stevens asked if Richard had anything to say, he finally broke. Seeing Marina in the gallery, he remembered the daughters he had almost killed, and the magnitude of his actions finally hit him. I don't know what came over me," he muttered, his hands trembling. "When I see what I almost did, Clara and Sophie are innocent. They didn't deserve—" He couldn't finish the sentence, breaking down in tears. Judge Stevens, an experienced family man, delivered the sentence with severity. "Richard Montgomery, you have been found guilty of attempted murder of a minor under your care. The premeditation and coldness of your actions make this crime especially repugnant. I sentence you to 20 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 10 years. Marina felt a deep relief, but also a sadness for the complete destruction of a family. Richard had lost not only his freedom, but also any chance of a future relationship with his daughters. Vivian, facing charges of moral complicity, saw her social world crumble. Her high society friends quickly distanced themselves from the scandal, and she lost both her husband and the social standing she had valued so much. Outside the courthouse, Marina hugged Sam, who had become much more than a savior. He was now part of the extended family that had formed through the tragedy. "Mr. Jones," she said with tears in her eyes, "I can never thank you enough for what you've done for us." "Marina," the fisherman replied gently, "those girls brought light into my life too. It was God who put us in each other's paths." Justice had been served, but more important than the punishment was the certainty that Clara and Sophie were finally safe, protected by people who truly loved them. 6 months after the trial, life on the banks of Stony Creek had found a new rhythm of peace and happiness. Marina had moved into a simple house just 500 yards from Sam's property, creating an extended family that worked in natural harmony. Clara and Sophie, now 5 years old, ran freely through the area, their laughter echoing through the valley like celestial music. The trauma of their father's abandonment had, with the help of child therapy and a great deal of love, transformed into a distant memory that no longer defined their cheerful and confident personalities. On that golden Saturday morning, Sam watched the girls playing in the yard while Marina prepared lunch. Thunder grazed peacefully near the children, still assuming his role as a protective guardian, but now in a relaxed and affectionate manner. "Grandpa Sam!" shouted Clara, running toward the fisherman. "Look what I drew." She held up a piece of paper with a colorful drawing showing two girls, a kind man, a white horse, and a blue creek. There were no signs of sadness or fear in the illustration, only joy and family. "It's beautiful, Princess," Sam said, lifting the girl into his arms. "You're becoming a very talented artist." Sophie approached, holding a rag doll that Marina had specially sewn for her. "Grandpa, can we go for a ride with Thunder today?" "Of course we can," Sam replied, smiling. "But first we'll have lunch with Mommy." The word grandpa had emerged. Naturally, a few weeks after the move, the girls needed a positive father figure in their lives, and Sam filled that void effortlessly. Marina not only accepted but encouraged the relationship, recognizing that the fisherman offered her daughters a kind of stable, protective love they had never known. During lunch, at the simple wooden table Sam had made with his own hands, Marina watched her daughters chat excitedly about the birds they had seen that morning, the fish in the creek, and their plans to plant flowers in the garden. "Marina," Sam said quietly, taking advantage of a moment when the girls were distracted, "I got a letter from the social worker yesterday. The case has been officially closed. The girls are in your full and permanent custody." Marina felt tears of relief welling in her eyes. "I can finally breathe easy. There's no longer any legal possibility of someone trying to take them from me." "Never again," Sam confirmed. "And you know you'll always have a family here with us." After lunch, as promised, Sam saddled up Thunder for a ride with the girls. They had learned to ride together on the patient horse, who seemed to understand the importance of being especially careful with his little passengers. The ride took them to the bank of the creek, at the exact spot where it had all begun 6 months earlier. But now, instead of terror and abandonment, the place represented salvation and new beginnings. "Grandpa," said Clara, watching the water flow peacefully, "the creek is pretty, isn't it?" "Very pretty, sweetheart," Sam agreed. "And you know why? Because this is where you found a new family." "And Thunder saved us," Sophie added, stroking the horse's white mane. Marina, who had joined them on the walk, watched the scene with deep emotion. Her daughters had not only survived the most terrible betrayal a child can face, but they had found something even more precious, a family based on true love, not biological obligation. "Girls," Marina said, kneeling beside them, "you know Mommy loves you very much, don't you?" "We know," they answered in unison, hugging her. "And Grandpa Sam loves you too." "And Thunder too," shouted Clara, making everyone laugh. At that moment, Sophie asked a question that revealed the surprising wisdom of children. "Mommy, why did Daddy Richard leave like that?" Marina exchanged a look with Sam, who nodded encouragingly. They had discussed how to explain the situation in a way the girls could understand, without carrying guilt or fear. "Sweethearts," Marina said softly, "sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices. Daddy Richard was confused and he hurt you, but that wasn't your fault. You are wonderful girls and you deserve to be loved. Now you have people who love you for real," Sam added, "and you'll never be alone again." Thunder, as if understanding the conversation, approached the girls and nudged each one gently with his muzzle, reaffirming his silent promise of eternal protection. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the makeshift family returned home. Clara and Sophie rode proudly on Thunder, their laughter mixing with the gentle sound of the current. "Grandpa," Clara said, when they reached the house, "tomorrow can we teach Thunder how to fish?" Sam laughed out loud, imagining his horse trying to fish. "I think he'd rather help us fish, sweetheart." That night, after the girls had fallen asleep in their cozy little rooms, Marina and Sam sat on the porch, watching the stars shine over the peaceful creek. "Sam," Marina said softly, "sometimes I think everything happened for a reason. If Thunder hadn't saved them, we never would have found this happiness." God works in mysterious ways, Sam replied, his simple wisdom touching Marina's heart. The girls brought purpose to my life, and you brought the family I always wanted. Inside, Clara and Sophie slept peacefully, dreaming of white horses, golden creeks, and loving grandfathers. The nightmare of abandonment had transformed into the blessing of true love. Stony Creek continued its eternal flow, a silent witness to how the water that had almost been an instrument of tragedy had become a symbol of renewal and hope. On its banks, a family born of love, not blood, thrived in perfect harmony. Clara and Sophie had learned to swim in the very waters that had nearly taken them, but now always accompanied by the watchful eyes of thunder and the ready arms of a family that loved them unconditionally.